done. And you are still around, as young as KB Asante. Now, Kwesi, your impressions. Last year, we had our 58th Independence Day celebration. 59 years. Some say that as a country, we haven't achieved what we should have achieved by now. Do you share that view?
Well, that's very true. If you look at the state of the national economy, if you look at the extent to which our economy is linked from the metropolitan, countries and so on, you can conclude that we haven't achieved too much, since independence on 6 March 1957. One of the objectives of the independence movement was also to facilitate the coming together of all African people on the continent and in the diaspora. That hasn't happened to a very large extent. We've not still been able to build that United States of Africa that Nkrumah and the founding fathers, the leaders of the liberation movement sought to create. So we are still a very far way off from the achievement of the broadest objectives of our independence movement. Nonetheless, I disagree with those who suggest that the day is not worth celebrating. This day is worth celebrating to a very large extent. It's worth celebrating because it is the day that restored some amount of dignity to the African people everywhere in the world. This is the day on which Ghanaians secured for themselves the right to choose their own leaders. This is the day that we said that the African, wherever he is, cannot be inferior to any other race. This is the day on which Africans everywhere began to assert their national dignity, began to assert their personal dignity and so on. And therefore, it is worth celebrating. The fact that, we've had difficulties, the fact that we haven't achieved all the objectives of the independence movement itself, emphasizes the need for us to celebrate the day in order that we can refocus on some of the things that we've not been able to achieve. I think by and large, the most important thing is how we celebrate the day. In celebrating this day, we can adopt themes and practices which emphasizes the broad objectives of the independence movement. For example, if there are going to be gatherings, receptions, and so on, we can make a point by insisting that on this day, everything that is served must be African. Everything that is worn must be African. Everything that is done must reflect the dignity of the African people. Everything that is done must show that we are still yearning for the total unification of the African continent, economic unity, political unity, and social cohesion, and so on. So it depends on how you celebrate the day, and I think that this day is really worth celebrating.
The things you said towards the end of your submission indicates that we must have a certain confidence in the things that we have as Africans, as black people. And this same view was reflected by KB Asante earlier when he said that at the time of independence, Ghana's confidence, the confidence of the Ghanaian, was very, very high. But we appear to have lost that confidence to the extent that today we look up to international organizations, we look up to the European Union, we look up to the UN to give us approval for the things that we know and we already know how to do. How do we restore the confidence that we need as a people?
Well, I must say that KB Asante was absolutely right. I mean, we seem to have lost a lot of confidence. I mean, now, our economic programs, our budget and so on, mean nothing until and unless they've been approved by the World Bank and the IMF. That's a significant loss of confidence. But you see, it is our own practices, it's the way we live our lives and so on, which makes us develop this confidence. You understand? We have neglected many aspects of our national life to the extent that we have become dependent on the outside world. For example, I have never understood why Ghana is a net importer of fish. I can't understand it. Look at the rivers we have. Look at the water bodies that we have in this country. Fortunately, we are bordered on the south by the Atlantic. Fortunately, we are bordered on the south by the Atlantic. In spite of all of these resources, we become dependent on the importation of fish. Of course, that will lead to devaluing the confidence of our people. Look, even under the Achampong government, it was decided that for all mining operations, Ghanaian interest should be 55%. We have weighted it down to the extent that Ghanaian interest in mining is only 3%. How does that give us confidence? You understand? We have leaders who are not listening to the Ghanaian people. They are listening to the European Union, they are listening to the World Bank, they are listening to the IMF, and so on. It devalues the confidence of our people. Now, the point that has to be made, and made very, very strongly, is that at independence, it was not just Ghanaian confidence which was in abundance. It was not just that the people of Ghana were very confident in themselves and their future and so on. Ghanaians, through that exhibition of confidence, also infected other Africans all over the world. I mean, the story is told of the first Black Star Line ship, which landed in New York. And the people of New York had never seen a ship with a black captain. All the officers were black, the crew members were black, and so on. And there was joyous celebration throughout the United States of America because blacks were demonstrating something. The story is also told of the first Ghana Airways flight, which landed at an airport in London, with all the crew being black. And it was phenomenal. Now, as a child, I remember very clearly the address, the first address for Sergeant Dr. Kwame Nkrumah in the United Nations General Assembly. And here is our president, who mounted the podium in Kente. You understand? And the impact was so heavy, so strong, and so on. Now, even at independence, the very dawn of independence, when the Osagyefo declared that the independence of Ghana was meaningless unless it was linked up with the total liberation of the African continent, the force of vibration throughout the African world was unimaginable. You understand?
Yeah.
And then we began to do things that were phenomenal. Look, it is true that the Akosombo Dam was constructed with assistance, from the Kaiser Group in the United States of America and so on. That is true. But I remember many people going to Akosombo and seeing that huge plant was managed entirely by Ghanaian engineers. And it was marvelous.
Yeah.
We created the biggest man-made lake,
yeah,
in the world. I mean, if you come to education, access to education was one of the best in the world. If you come to housing and so on, we were making great strides. That is what gave us the confidence. And we told the world that we were capable of managing our own affairs. And we told the world that we were not afraid of making mistakes. And we told the world that we will hold our own against what anybody else thought.
Today, are we telling the world the same things?
We are not. Unfortunately, we are not. Unfortunately, we've come to the point where dependence seems to be the national mantra. You understand? Dependence seems to be the national mantra. Look, we ourselves have come to realize that Ghana has huge potential for rice cultivation. Indeed, there is the potential to produce rice in all the 10 regions of Ghana. And yet, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we realized that we were spending about $120 million a year importing rice. Now the figure is much, much higher. So therefore, we decided to impose some tariffs on rice imports. And we decided to impose some tariffs on the importation of chicken and so on. We went to Parliament, we got approval for these tariffs. In no time, we turned around. You understand? In no time, we turned around. Why did we turn around? Because our so-called development partners, who played a key role in the transatlantic slave trade, who played a key role in colonialism, and who today are determined to keep us dependent, told us not to do it. So we've lost that confidence that Osagyefo and the CPP gave us as a people. We've lost that confidence which made us defeat British colonialism. We've lost that confidence which made Ghana the impetus of the national liberation movement throughout Africa. We've lost it.
This year's theme for the celebration is investing in the youth for Ghana's transformation. They are the future of this country. To what extent should we develop projects and policies that would reflect this theme?
No doubt, the youth are the inheritors of what we do today. If we do wrong things today, it will be inherited by the youth. If we do the right things today, it will be inherited by the youth. The future will be shaped by the youth of today. And I, therefore, have no difficulty with the theme which has been adopted for this celebration. But you see, we must give real practical meaning to that theme. I am totally disgusted by the situation in which now we no longer teach history as a subject throughout our educational institutions. Now, any people who do not know their history are not likely to construct a future which is reflective of their needs and aspirations. So choosing this theme is all right, but it is not sufficient. We need to make sure that history, our history, the history of the world, is taught in all educational institutions. The people must know why we struggle for independence. If the people knew the conditions which existed before 6 March 1957, we would not be getting calls from all manner of people that we should stop the celebration and so on. I lived in those days. And I know, when I was growing up, the Rich Hospital, just close by, was an European hospital. And it would have taken a miracle to find a black person receiving treatment in a hospital in our own country. When I was growing up, you went to church. The priest was white, Caucasian. You understand? You went to school. Your biology teacher was white, Caucasian. Everywhere you went, even some of our ministers were white. Indeed, the head of the Ghana Armed Forces used to be General Alexander. And this is after independence. This is not before independence. General Alexander and so on. Now, that fact itself, the fact of all our important institutions, the things that we cherish, being headed by, if you like, strangers is not quite the appropriate word, but being occupied by persons who are different from us, help to develop the complex of inferiority which is bringing us back. So, therefore, Nkrumah found the need to embark on a policy of Africanization. General Alexander, for example, was a very good friend of Nkrumah, but Nkrumah told him to go. According to Nkrumah in his writings and so on, General Alexander was a good soldier, but he was not Ghanaian. He was not African. He was British. And his headship of the Ghana Armed Forces continued to deepen the complex of inferiority. So Nkrumah asked him to go. So
it's not just about the words, but it's about the demonstrable acts.
Exactly. Look, if we do all the things that we are doing, if we adopt all these themes that we are adopting, and you go to our ministries, and the so-called technical advisors come from the colonial metropolis. You understand? You have technical advisors from the EU, you have technical advisors from the IMF and the World Bank and so on. What does that tell us? How do we develop our confidence and so on? So these are some of the very critical issues that we need to address. And you see, our leaders need to demonstrate themselves a belief in us, a belief in the ability of the working people of Ghana to transform their own society. And that demonstration is not that manifest.
Okay, interesting one there. That's Kwesi Pratt telling us a few things about what we need to do and the things that we probably aren't doing right as a country. And also we see that President John Dramani Mahama has just arrived at the Independence Square, flanked by the First Lady, that's Dr. Lordina Mahama, who coincidentally is celebrating her birthday today. So you say happy birthday to the First Lady, Lordina Mahama. Now, Kwesi, let's wrap up briefly so we can go over to the Independence Square. The youth are the focus of today's event. I'm sure you consider yourself a youth. Your advice to them as we mark Ghana's 59th independence celebration. Tomorrow, Ghana will be going on, next year, Ghana will be going on pension. Your advice to the youth?
Well, it will be impertinent, actually arrogant on my part to suggest that I know everything and that I can tell people what to do and so on. Look, I think that all of us need to learn about our conditions and how to get out of this condition of neocolonialism. Every one of us, old people, young people, whatever, we have a responsibility to understand our condition of poverty, of misery, of underdevelopment. And we have a responsibility to study, to work in order to change this situation. Because if we continue on this trajectory, we will end up back in colonialism.
Thank you very much, Kwesi Pratt Jr. So we'll go over straight to the Independence Square. The President, John Dramani Mahama, has arrived, and the Ghana national anthem is currently